Recently, I've been covering a lot of very well-known fan games on this channel. Five Nights at Candy's, Pop Goes, and Animatronic Memories are probably names you're all familiar with. Recently, I've been looking for a FNAF game to cover that I personally had never heard of, and today I've definitely found one. I'm not gonna lie to you, it's super weird, but however, it does have its charm and an amazing story. So, let's waste no time and hop right into Tales of the Bunnyman. Tales of the Bunnyman opens with a cutscene that reminds me a lot of the old official Five Nights at Freddy's trailers, specifically Five Nights at Freddy's 2. We get several shots of the pizzeria interlaced with pieces of dialogue explaining the exposition of the story. We play as a man named Vincent Baldwin, who we later learn used to be a night guard and is one of the missing children's fathers, the father of Cassidy. We're entering the building to do some investigating and find out where our missing child went. And with our motive in mind, we're safe to head into Night 1 and start talking about what this game really has to offer. Night 1 introduces two characters, but before I start talking about them, I want to talk about the office itself. In our office, the first thing I want to get out of the way is this picture. I don't know who this is. I checked the wiki and couldn't figure out who this is. That's it. I just don't know who this is. Anyways, on to something actually important. The coolest thing I noticed about this office is that there are actually two rooms that we can move between, the typical office room and the boiler room. I'll talk more about the boiler room later when it becomes important. The door to the boiler room can be held shut, as animatronics will actually have to travel through it in order to get to your office. The only other things in our office is our camera system and a giant gift box. We can hide inside of this gift box to be able to protect ourselves from the first major threat of this night, Foxy. Foxy behaves pretty much exactly the same as in Five Nights at Freddy's 1. He starts on Pirate's Cove and makes his way through some phases before attacking. However, something unique about Foxy is he actually has two completely different attacks he can perform, each of which requires you to do something completely different to counteract him. The first attack he has is pretty simple. After he leaves Pirate's Cove, he will charge towards your office. When he does, you'll have to quickly jump inside the present until you hear him run away, after which you can jump back out and continue. His other attack is unfortunately a mechanic I've grown to dislike more and more as I play FNAF games. After leaving Pirate's Cove, Foxy has a chance to appear randomly on one of your cameras. When he does, all you have to do is find him and stare at him until he goes back to Pirate's Cove. This is mainly a me thing, but I've personally grown tired of the find them on the cameras mechanic. Yes, I do play Five Nights at Freddy's for a living, so yes, I'm going to see repeated mechanics a lot. Most sane people don't play as much Five Nights at Freddy's as I do, so most people won't find this mechanic to be that big of a deal, but hey, at least it's not a stupid fucking music box mechanic. We'll talk about that later. The only other threat introduced on this night is Bonnie. Bonnie is incredibly simple in how he works, as is typical in most FNAF games that feature him. Bonnie will make his way through the building and to your office. Afterwards, you'll be able to hear him at your door. You'll need to quickly go up to the door and hold it shut until you hear him leave, like Five Nights at Freddy's 4. When you do, you'll know it's safe to reopen the door and continue the night. Very basic. That's just how we like Bonnie, isn't it, guys? Right? You like it when Bonnie's basic, right? You wouldn't want Bonnie to just hop bottom right into your office and start fingering you, would you? Freak. And with that, we can move on to the post-Night 1 minigame. Here's where we get to talking a lot about how cool this game really is. This game does narrative storytelling in a different way than any other FNAF game I've ever seen. Instead of an 8-bit minigame or a slideshow lore dump, Tales of the Bunnyman turns into a visual novel during the post-night sections, having you play in the perspective of a different character each night. I think this is actually super cool. While yes, you may think that it looks straight out of a My Hero Academia DeviantArt fan page, it is very clear that an amazing amount of care and effort went into these post-night sections, and that cannot go unnoticed. Before I really start talking about the lore of this game, I need to make it incredibly clear that there was so much poured into this story. There's so many details that I could point out that would make this video quite literally take hours to complete. And while I'd love to be able to talk about all of it, I don't have the confidence in myself to do so, and to be able to portray it in the way that it rightfully deserves. I'll be going over what happens in the story, but I won't be diving into every single minute detail, and I apologize if you were hoping that I would. Anyways, in this minigame, we play in the perspective of Jeremy Jr. Fitzgerald. After hanging out with his friends at Freddy Fazbear's, he notices that his mom has not yet come to pick him up. After waiting an extended period of time, he decides to just watch the performance on stage. Hearing a strange whistling coming from backstage, he enters to investigate, only to abruptly get abducted and murdered by the Bunny Man, going on to possess Bonnie. I honestly think that these post-night minigames are a breath of fresh air in this genre. I've never seen anything like it before, and I'd love to see more FNAF games try to do something new like this to tell their story. But now it's time for us to move on to Night 2. Night 2 only introduces one new thread, that being Chica. Chica does exactly what you'd expect her to do, and no, I don't mean eating until she pops like a balloon. What I really mean is moving through the cameras and then going to your office. Oh my fucking god, that is gross. Yuck. Fucking yuck, bro. She does go through one additional camera compared to Bonnie, making you see her less often than him, but other than that, she's exactly the same as Bonnie. I'll also use this night to talk about the only thing I dislike about this game. The mouse. Oh my god, this mouse is atrocious. Oh no, this mouse is really bad. If you're at all familiar with my channel, you'll already know that the way the mouse works is always something I'll have a problem with when fan games try to switch it up. In most FNAF games, when you move your mouse to the side of the screen will scroll in that direction until it hits the end of your office. That makes sense, and this is good. Tales of the Bunny Man instead decided to take a route similar to Sister Location. If you are to move your mouse to one side of the screen in Tales of the Bunny Man, your mouse won't follow the moving office. Instead, the game will keep track of its simulated X and Y positions in the office. And while this may sound super cool, in practice, it leads to you having to move your mouse all the way across your desk or increasing your mouse's sensitivity to be able to make up for it. Is this nitpicky? Yes. But I am giving my opinion on a game, so I think it's important to talk about things that I notice, especially when it's the main interaction mechanic in the entire game. Anyways, moving on to the post-Night 2 minigame, where we play in the perspective of Susie Sutherland. The group of friends were supposed to play the newly installed arcade game, Pop Goes vs. the Machinist? 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 I don't know. Instead, she decides to split up from the group to go look for Bonnie. Walking around the building, we can talk to a kid named Ollie, who mentions something about Bonnie acting weird recently. Given the timeline of the events this game has, I'm fairly certain that this cutscene is taking place 16 days after Jeremy's disappearance. So I think it's safe to say that Jeremy at this point in time is already inside of the Bonnie costume. During this minigame is when Susie can also find a VHS tape relating to Edwin Murray. If you couldn't already tell, this game's story is heavily entwined with the official FNAF games. Later, Susie heads over to Pirate's Cove to get a peek at Foxy, getting startled by William inside of the Spring Bonnie suit. It's at this point I need to mention two things. One, why is this specific camera in the post-nights a 3D render instead of the usual 2D drawing? And two, why is William the only character in the entire game to have voice acting? Mr. Afton, don't scare me like that.
Now, what's a missy like you doing snooping around a pirate's property?
Why is he voice acting? I'm much more curious about my second question. I was a little caught off guard when I first heard him speak, since, again, nobody in the game thus far ever has. But regardless, that's not very important. After a brief, uncomfortable conversation with Afton, we meet up with our friends again at the new arcade machine, and as we play the game, we're seen being stalked by the Bunny Man. If you couldn't already guess, Susie Sutherland goes on to possess Chica. Now it's time to talk about Night 3, which introduces one new threat, Freddy and the marionette. Now, pause. Let's just stop for a moment and talk about Freddy first, okay? Freddy, like Foxy, has two different attacks. We'll talk about the more simple one first. Freddy will make his way through the cameras and enter your boiler room. The reason he does so is to attempt to cut the power, because doing so will allow for the marionette to come spread your buns and lick up your crack. To prevent this from happening, we will have to enter the boiler room and hold our flashlight on his face, causing him to bug out and leave the boiler room. However, before he does, we actually get to see him creepily tilt his body. Such a small detail, but I actually really like it. Now we can talk about the other mechanic Freddy has that I originally thought was going to make me want to skin an elephant. As previously mentioned, it's clear that Freddy wants to assist in helping the marionette grope us. So, Freddy's other attack is him going to the music box to fuck up the marionette's sleep schedule. Fun fact, I used to work a graveyard shift at a news station, and let me tell you, you don't want to fuck with nobody's sleep schedule, bro. So, in order to save the marionette's sanity, we must remotely shut down the music box before Freddy can finish. Moving on to the Night 3 Post-9 minigame, we play in the perspective of Fritz Smith II. Let me tell you, this guy is a big fan of Foxy. So much so that he insists on constantly talking like a pirate, something that made me want to eat my own lungs throughout my playthrough because I was writhing in cringe. A.S. the worst one. It be fixin' to be jolly. What the fuck does that mean? Fritz leaves the group to go look for Foxy. Going to Pirate's Cove, he finds a decommissioned Foxy behind the curtains. Additionally, he finds a diary written by Henry. I guess for some reason, this is where Henry goes to vent, right next to the fucked up looking robot. A little weird, Henry, but you do you, boo. Inside of the diary, we read that Henry is struggling to cope with the loss of his daughter and his theory about Jeremy and Susie's disappearances having something to do with each other. Little did he know how right he truly was. Whilst continuing to read the diary, the bunny man appears behind him and drags him into the back room, all while taunting him, saying that he thought he was more interested in Foxy than Henry's diary. Fritz would go on to possess Foxy. Moving on to Night 4, we get to talk about a very odd threat, Balloon Boy. Yes, for some reason, Balloon Boy is in this game. Don't question it. I guess the developer of this game just hates fun. Balloon Boy isn't a very difficult threat to deal with, thankfully, instead serving more of an annoyance, which is very fitting for his character. Balloon Boy can only appear in two rooms in the entire game, the boiler room and your backstage camera. You'll have to listen out for a vent sound cue. When you hear it, you'll have to travel to the back room and find where Balloon Boy is, because, unlike Freddy, he has multiple different locations that he can stand in. Once you find Balloon Boy, just like Freddy, all you have to do is hold your flashlight on him until he goes away. I'm really not entirely sure why Balloon Boy exists in this game. I have yet to find any story reason for it either. Maybe it's just a popular character to put into the game, or maybe I'm just reading way too much into this. I'm not really sure. But hey, let's move on to the post-Night 4 minigame. In this minigame, we play as Gabriel Collins. Gabriel sneaks into Freddy Fazbear's Pizza because he has a hunch that his missing friends are still inside. Once he enters, he searches the location, eventually discovering the marionette. They quickly become friends and begin exploring the establishment together. Eventually, they stumble across Michael and William Afton. William is trying to convince Michael to work as a performer, playing the character of Bonnie. But before we can hear anything else, William spots us. He chases us through the building, and the marionette hides us in its gift box. However, unfortunately for Gabriel, William finds him anyway and is knocked out. He wakes up inside of the Freddy Fazbear costume, watching William Afton jump around the dining room, mocking him through his last breaths. Gabriel would then go on to possess Freddy. This is easily one of the most fucked up cutscenes throughout the entire game. I'm no edgelord, as some people seem to think I am, but I really enjoy when games show us the depraved things that the villains do. I and many others don't want to just hear about things happening, we want to see them as well. Of course, I don't think we all want to literally see the children getting murdered, but I think showing off the situations in the way that Tales of the Bunnyman does is incredibly interesting. Next, we get to move on to Night 5, the final main night in Tales of the Bunnyman. This night adds Fredbear, an interesting but fitting final character choice. Fredbear acts as an everything character, being able to take on the role of every animatronic besides Balloon Boy and Foxy. However, unlike most everything nights that take place in other FNAF games, Fredbear is active alongside each other animatronic, adding one more layer of stress to the nights. Again, he doesn't have any unique mechanics by himself, but this time I'm honestly okay with that, only because the other characters are still active. It's at this point I want to bring up something I should have brought up a long time ago: the character designs. From what I've seen, the community seems to be pretty split on their opinions of these character designs. A lot of people love them and think that in combination with the grungy environment, it makes them look very creepy. However, on the other hand, I've seen plenty of people who think that the designs look unprofessional and seemingly come out of a game that came out many years ago. I personally have no problems with the character designs. I think they look creepy and uncomfortable. However, I do think that the texturing on the characters does look a bit odd, but nothing that I feel takes away from the immersion. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Also, since I'm being a little meta right now, go subscribe to my new channel, Dexter Gray. I cover non-FNAF horror games over there, and we have a lot of fun. Anyways, moving on to the final post-night minigame where we play in the perspective of Cassandra Baldwin, or better known, Cassidy. Now, noticing that she's the only member of her friend group that hasn't gone missing, she vows to figure out what happened to them and find where they all disappeared to. Entering the back room, she finds a Fredbear plushie which, throughout the game, has been shown to be able to teleport on its own, and yet, for some reason, nobody felt like that was weird at all. This is really the only gripe I have with this story, the plushie teleporting around, and multiple people know about this, yet nobody is at all a little concerned about it. On top of that, it is literally never once elaborated on or explained why this happens. I can't even draw a conclusion because there's quite literally no reason, but let's try to put that behind us for a moment and continue. We do know that the plushie is being used by Afton to lure Cassidy into the back room. Now, pause. I know I just said there's literally no reason given as to why it's teleporting, and you may be questioning why I said that even though I just stated that William was using it to lure Cassidy. However, that still doesn't explain how it was fucking teleporting, and still doesn't explain why nobody gave that a second thought. Anyways, Cassidy is successfully lured into the back room. Scared, Cassidy runs out of the pizzeria and later returns for a Halloween party. I know that's not what that says, I'm sorry. As she explores, she's found by the bunny man who presumably knocks her out after stating, "You forgot me." She awakens to find herself inside of the Fredbear costume. William explains that originally he planned to save the Fredbear costume for Henry, but decided to use it for Cassidy instead. During their conversation, it's revealed that Vincent, the character that we've been playing as in the night sections, according to William, is a terrible night guard, which would technically leave him responsible for not noticing the children's disappearances on the camera, since every action that William had been taking was done under the constant surveillance of those cameras, including what's happening right now in front of us. This would give us a perfect reason as to why he's returning to the restaurant now to find his daughter, because he didn't watch her like he was supposed to. He never saw what happened. Afterwards, we get one last cutscene. Vincent walks up to the Fredbear animatronic and realizes it's his daughter. However, he trips and falls, which leads to him getting killed by his own daughter, and Tales of the Bunnyman abruptly comes to a close. Almost. There's actually one more thing to talk about, that being Night 6, or as this game calls it, the epilogue. In it, after completing the final challenge, which is just a harder version of Night 5, we see the line, "He finally found the suit that will become his tomb, the last lingering piece of his soul. A good song never dies." With that, we get to watch William's spring lock failure and onlook as he bleeds out. We're shown that Vincent, our character, was found dead inside of Freddy Fazbear's, and several news outlets labeled him as the reason the kids were murdered. I can't lie to you guys, I'm really eager to talk about this story, since after reading into it, I actually think it's really good, and it's clear that a bunch of effort was put into it. But like I said previously, I'm just not confident in my abilities to do it for myself. I've tossed around the idea of just reading the highly detailed explanation on the wiki that was written by somebody that was far more talented than I am, but I've decided against doing that since I don't want to come off as lazy and uninspired. And as much as I hate saying this, I'd highly recommend you go to the wiki and read up on it. It's actually such an amazingly well-written story, and I think it might just be one of the best takes on the official FNAF story I've ever seen. Overall, I think Tales of the Bunnyman is an enjoyable experience. The post-night minigames are interesting, and the story is fantastic and told in a way that isn't overtly confusing like most FNAF games like to be. However, I do think that the actual gameplay mechanics are pretty lackluster. Not only does each character not really have synergy with one another, this game is also just too easy. Throughout the nights, it never really feels like the characters are becoming more aggressive, which tends to lead to boring nights where you're just waiting for the much more enjoyable minigame sections. But what do you think? Do you agree with me, or do you think Tales of the Bunnyman is the most well-balanced FNAF game experience? Let me know in the comments below. In my Showman's Awakening video, I asked you guys what your favorite mechanic from a Five Nights at Freddy's game was. My favorite answer was this one by RoanQ8V. They said the turning off the light mechanic, specifically from Tyke & Sons Lumber Co. I think Tyke & Sons did that mechanic really well too, so it's cool to see someone else mentioning it. The question of this video is, what's the most disturbing thing you've seen come out of a FNAF game and why? With the question of the video being asked, subscribe to the channel, I'd appreciate it a lot. I've been Dexter, and I'll see you all in the next video. See ya!